Thank you very much, and I would like to thank Microsol for hosting this event. I'm very pleased to be able to share the findings of this report to you. This is one that is very near and dear to us. We really think this is such an important area, and we're very pleased to have been able to bring research on it to the industry. So you've already heard a little bit about me, but I do want to talk a little bit about Dodge data and analytics before I dive in. Now, hopefully everyone on the call is familiar with the Dodge Global Network, with our Dodge reports, with our amazing quantity of construction project information, of construction firm information, and in addition to that, hopefully the designers are also familiar with suites.com. But I sit in a division called Market Research and Intelligence. We do both off-the-shelf and custom analytics. We draw from the strength of the Dodge data, but in my particular case, we also do custom market research projects in the industry. And the Smart Market Report series is part of that overall custom market research role. And for the Smart Market Reports, we do publish all of this data for free in the industry. We focus on trends that we think are transforming the construction industry. Our main areas of focus, since we were founded in 2006, is sustainability, technology and innovation, and practices and processes. And you can see some examples of recent reports that we've brought out under each of those categories. And I do want to emphasize that any of the reports you see posted here are available for free download at our analyticsstore.construction.com website. I do know, though, that Annalisa told me that she will be sharing this particular report, the Drive Toward Healthier Buildings, with all of the attendees. But I do hope you go and check out some of the other resources that we have there. Now, before I dive into the findings of this report, I do want to explain why we think this is a particularly valuable opportunity, this focus on healthier buildings right now. For years, since about 2006, we have been conducting a regular study with Siemens on corporate sustainability. And, you know, we just did one back in 2015. We do it every 3 years. You can see we had 150 responses from corporate America, and they're from very large companies. Over half of them come from companies with annual revenues of over $1 billion. In addition to that, our respondents are very high-level employees in these organizations. 60% of our respondents were C-level executives. So that you understand where this is coming from. And when we've studied this from the beginning, we created a scale of 5 stages of corporate sustainability. One is really just you just review sustainability as complying with government regulations. 2 is also pretty low. You still see it as a driver of costs. 3 is, you know, about average, you know, proactively applying sustainability and considering it consistent, no longer viewing it as an additional cost. We view green companies as those that fall in stages 4 and 5. 4 is integrating sustainability with key strategies, and 5 is where you really feel like your commitment to sustainability is transformational for your company. And we have been tracking on a survey every 3 years where companies self-report that they fall in these stages. So I do want to emphasize we're not going in and opening up the hood and finding out about them. We are letting them self-report, but it's still fascinating to see how that has evolved over time. And that is what this chart shows. Now you can see the blue bar is 2006, that bright pink is 2009, the green is 2012, and the maroon is 2015, the latest findings. And we saw for the first time a bit of a shift in the study. Now, first I want to make very clear that we are still seeing growth in sustainability. We still see corporate commitment to sustainability growing. And the best example of that is the shift between 2012 and 2015 in stages 3 and 4. You can see that there is a dramatic growth in stage 4, which is that green level of company in 2015. And that is the fundamental finding. But there is also something interesting going on. Every time we've conducted this study in the past, we've seen those on the far end, stages 1 and 2, go down, and we've seen stages 4 and 5 go up. You know, we've seen an overall shift in greater emphasis on sustainability. This time, if you look at stages 1 and 2 and you just compare the green and the maroon bars, the 2012 and the 2015, you can see that there's a slight break in that pattern, that there is a shift up of those in the percentage of those who identify themselves in stage 1 and stage 2. Now, this is a very, very tiny shift, and it actually, for the most part, falls within the margin of error. So I'm certainly not suggesting that people are getting less sustainable, but what we're seeing, we believe, in this data is perhaps a movement towards leveling off, a movement towards sustainability just becoming kind of standard practice. And it isn't surprising that that shift on the left is accompanied by a slight downshift in those who really feel like sustainability has a transformational impact on their company, which is stage 5. And you can see that that is a bit of a notable drop from 9% to 6%. So again, the quick way we're phrasing this is that we feel like this suggests that sustainability might be reaching middle age. And we've already seen a lot of people saying, look, just to be competitive in certain markets, they have to have green buildings. So if you're a company that has built a reputation on sustainability and you want to still stay ahead of the market, what is your best area of interest? And it really looks like right now the emerging trend on healthier buildings is going to have an enormous impact in the industry. And I'm going to have some data to back up that claim as we go through this discussion. So this is actually the second report that we've done that's looked at this drive toward healthier buildings. The first one, I'll reference it occasionally, but for the most part it was a very different study. It was really just forming a baseline for what the industry was even thinking about healthier buildings. This time we wanted to take a more tactical approach, understand how owners view the concept of healthier buildings, where they see its advantages, and how committed they are to it. And we'll go through all that through this. So you can see that the study was conducted in February and March of 2016, that we had a very large participant pool, 975 owners, architects, interior designers, and contractors from 45 countries. However, the bulk of our responses came from 2 countries, the U.S. and Canada. And in the U.S., you can see we still had a really robust response, 671 respondents. And the discussion I'm going to do today is going to focus on those 671 responses. I do also want to take a moment to call out some of the partners that helped make the study possible. And Canada Green Building Council and Delos were our premier partners in this effort. They were incredibly important and influential in the development of what's important, what to look at. And without them, we wouldn't have had the funding to proceed. And it was also supported by additional funding from CBRE, Dewberry, and USGBC. And Armstrong and Regen were also contributing partners as well. We really do rely on the forward-thinking companies that sponsor these reports to keep them going. So the first question, of course, is what is a healthier building? And it's funny, when we looked at our earlier report and the study we did, one of the gaps in that initial study was that we never really defined what a healthier building was. And this time we wanted to definitely make sure we did so. And we felt that it was very important not to reinvent the wheel. So we thought it was quite important to use the World Health Organization description of health, because it really does capture what we think is most important about this look at healthier buildings, and that is that health is a complete state of physical, mental, and social health and well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And that's important because I think a lot of times when people think about healthier buildings right now, there's a sense of, well, the building's not making me unhealthy. It's not exposing me to harmful chemicals. The air quality is decent. But it really is so much more than that. You want to also consider, we spend so much time in buildings, you need to consider what the impact is on mental and social health as well, and how it can actually boost physical health, not just not damage it. So We wanted to also get a baseline, and we did this in the previous study as well, how much of a priority health is in the industry. So we asked our four major categories of participants. Well, we gave them 7 factors overall, and we asked them to rate them in terms of how influential they were on the design and construction decisions that they make. This list shows, down to the point where they said, the percentages who said that each of these categories that are listed were highly influential on their design and construction decisions. So they were asked to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. This is everyone who gave these a 4 or a 5. And as you can see, it is pretty telling. One thing is that when it comes to owners, architects, and interior designers, the good news is that at least 2/3 of owners, about 3/4 of architects, and 83% of interior designers say that these factors are highly influential on their decisions. And that is really good news. On the other hand, though, you have to also consider how other things that might be competing for resources with healthier buildings, that might actually have conflicting interests in how you design the building, how they rate. And it's a little interesting. When you look at interior design, it's clearly health is a top of mind issue. But when you look at architects, it ranks 4th. But the gap between the highest ranking element, which is design and construction cost savings, and occupant health and well-being, is only 10 percentage points. And that isn't a huge gap for a 4-point difference. So you can see that it still has a pretty strong influence in the architectural community. When it comes to owners, the picture is slightly different, because that gap between 85% of those who say that they're highly influenced by design and construction cost savings and the 82% who say they're highly influenced by operating cost savings and the 67% who say they're highly influenced by occupant health and well-being suggests that there's still some need for occupant health and well-being to gain greater priority there. That it's still, when it comes to the battle of making final decisions, there might be an issue. And contractors, as you can see, really are not putting health and well-being as a very high, top of mind, highly influential factor in their decisions. So why do owners care about healthier buildings, and what are they most interested in? Well, why they care, there's been a lot of studies that have demonstrated over the years that healthier environments lead to greater productivity. And certainly one of the most compelling was the one that came out last year from the Harvard School of Public Health with a lot of different partners. And one thing that was fascinating about it is it's always been very challenging to measure the specific impacts of specific building features on white-collar work. And this study tackled that head-on by creating controlled environments that they could compare and then adjusting, say, the level of VOCs at one time, the level of air, the type of air quality that people were experiencing at other times between two groups in these controlled environments, had them do a series of tests and really measured the impact of things like lower VOCs, higher ventilation rates, and reduced carbon dioxide. And you can see the findings were pretty dramatic, too. There was a massive increase, a massive enhancement in the ability to store information, memory, the ability to think strategically, to respond to crises. Now, the percentages for the last two are also, it's still pretty impressive, not quite as impressive as those first 3, but I really love the 2 of them together. Wouldn't I love, personally, to work in an environment where not only could I have very improved focused activity level, really be able to focus really well on my tasks, but also have an environment that improved the breadth of my approach to my tasks. If I could conquer those 2, personally for me, that would be an enormous victory. So it's a really compelling study about productivity. And, a lot of people have considered productivity the holy grail of what's driving healthier buildings. Because, of course, if you can demonstrate to owners that bottom line, that they're improving productivity, then that's going to have a huge impact. I'm sure you've all heard the cost ratios on buildings. I won't go into all of that. But what's interesting is our study while it demonstrates that productivity is a really important goal for owners, that 2/3 of the owners we surveyed felt that improved financial benefit due to greater occupant productivity would be a goal that they'd want to achieve from investing in healthier buildings. In fact, there were things that ranked higher. And one of them is, not surprisingly, happier and healthier building occupants. But the other one is very interesting. 75%, significantly more than said that productivity was a top goal, said that improved tenant or employee satisfaction with the building was one of their top goals that they wanted to achieve from a healthier building. And one thing that's very exciting about that is that that is a result that we can actually measure. You can see that we actually asked owners who had made investments in healthier buildings, well, what improvement did you see on this? Now, 26% said that they just didn't know whether or not they saw an impact or not. But you can see that if you eliminate that quarter in that blue piece on the side of the pie, and you look at those who saw a high or medium level of improvement, it's pretty much everyone who's left, right? There's just a very small percentage of those who are left who fall in the small improvement or no measurable impact that most are seeing if they're making these investments, a notable impact on employee satisfaction and engagement. So that already this suggests that the motivation that owners have to participate in this activity is already there in ways that can already be demonstrated, which is very exciting. Of course, owners are also very interested in the financial impacts of healthier buildings. But at this point, when we surveyed them, what's most notable is those bright blue wedges of the circle on the left, that the owners really don't know whether having healthier buildings helps them lease buildings more quickly, creates a high impact on asset value, or helps them charge a premium rent. When we look at those who do say they have a good sense of this, though, a very interesting picture emerges. It's very clear that leasing buildings more quickly is the key positive impact, with most of those who have a sense that they understand what's happening because of their healthier building investments feeling that this is the case. We see also a pretty dramatic percentage, 26% versus 15%, who say that they see a positive impact on asset value. And we're interested to conduct this study in a few years because it will be nice as people start tracking this and pay attention to it more closely to see if that percentage grows. However, we did find that most of them did not feel that they had the ability to charge more rent. They could get people into their buildings faster, and the buildings themselves are worth more, but they couldn't quite charge. Most of them did not feel they could charge more rent in the marketplace. But we also did a series of in-depth interviews, and I'm not going to go into those in detail during this particular thing, but it was fascinating to find out what owners who have dipped their toes in this area, have started to make these investments, were saying about them. And one of them said, if we can lease our space faster and at higher rents, and that is because we're differentiating ourselves in the market, then it is worth every penny and a great deal more. So it's not necessarily that idea that, I can get much more productive workers. It's that idea that it's lending to my brand, it's making people think that we're a higher quality workspace or that we're a higher quality space to lease from. It's about that tenant or occupant experience. So what are the specific healthier building features that owners are interested in? So you can see that the top three that owners are interested in, by far the top one is enhanced ventilation. And one of the things that did come out of the in-depth interviews is that is because that's an area they can actually control. There's other reasons too, but that did come out as, it's not something that a tenant ultimately decides. That's something that if you own a multi-tenant building, you actually have an impact on the amount of ventilation that goes into all the spaces. In addition to that, a lot of owners were very interested in layout encouraging physical activity. And then, surprisingly, almost a third said we're pretty interested in transparency of product information. And what's really fascinating is when you take these top features that owners are interested in and you compare the findings, we also asked architects, interior designers, and contractors, well, how interested do you think your clients are in these features? Consistently, the building design and construction practitioners underestimated the interest of their clients compared to the findings of the owners who participated in the study. So you can see that, again, you sort of match the grouping, although there was a little bit more emphasis in the study that we conducted on greater public awareness of the health impacts of buildings. That was by far that ranked the highest driver out of the choices that they had. Government incentives were also considered very important, but equal to government incentives in the study was more research on design and construction approaches that can positively impact health, and research on productivity impacts was also considered to be an important driver. Now what's interesting is owners really want to know more research on specific design and construction approaches that can positively impact health. That was number one for them. Number one for architects and interior designers was greater public awareness of the health impacts of buildings, and number one for contractors was government incentives. And so that motivation for being able to afford healthier building products for contractors was a huge influence. A big part of our study also suggested that research and public policies may be important drivers of healthier buildings in the future. In addition to the main study that I am focusing on, the report also contains an entire secondary study, and this is the only reference I have to it here. So when you get your copy of the report, I recommend you take a look at this section because it really is quite interesting about what public health professionals are saying on this issue, what's going on with their organizations. We surveyed both public health officials in the U.S. and Canada, and these were their responses. 98% said in the U.S. said that their institutions were conducting research on the health impacts of buildings. About 2/3 said that they saw government policies in place that required companies to avoid using hazardous materials in buildings. But interestingly, out of all of, when they were asked the same question, but not what are you doing now, but what do you see being considered for the future, the highest percentage saw the incentives for design that encourages physical activity being considered for future policy. So that is clearly going to be an area that we're going to see a lot more of in the future. Some of the biggest challenges that our respondents pointed to, now this goes back to the owners, architects, interior designers, and contractors again. Some of the biggest challenges that they reported, by far there was one challenge. Budget concerns and limitations was ranked highest by over 3/4 of those who participated in the study. It is more than double any other challenge, and if you look at the other challenges that even had a relatively high percentage that selected them, unclear business case and even the need to prioritize other items, they relate back to that issue of budget concerns and limitations. So that business case becomes incredibly important, right? If you're going to overcome this question about budget concerns and limitations, the way that it happened in the green building movement was that the building case was sufficiently compelling so that people felt that the investment made sense. However, as we also saw in the green building movement, creating a healthier building is not necessarily a terribly expensive process. It's still a relatively new area. There is still a sense that it is costly, but we were able to feature a case study on an apartment building in Minneapolis. It was 90 units, and over half of them were affordable units. So they had very strict cost controls they had to do to make this building economically viable. And they landed up with a construction cost of $154 per square foot. But in doing that, they were able to really achieve several petals of the Living Building Challenge. They certainly were very interested in energy use intensity, and you can see that they were able to achieve a 72% reduction off of a baseline of a typical building in that area. And this is despite the fact that there was a real attention to getting to air quality, and that they used a dedicated outdoor air system as part of their system, and there is an energy penalty for doing that. But you can see that even at this cost, they were able, through smart design, to counter that kind of penalty. When it came to healthier, the impacts that were specifically healthier, daylighting was a really important issue to them, and views to the outdoors. But the most interesting thing that they did is they put this enormous emphasis on health with their materials. For example, they used a bio-based tile that eliminated 11.2 tons of toxins from the building. They had VOC levels between 20 and 30 micrograms per cubic meter in the apartments before the move-in, when your target is usually a maximum of 500. Just these extraordinary differences, and they did it. But the way they did it, it added less than 1% to the total construction cost. And one of the things that they did to achieve this goal is they required, and we'll come back to this later in the presentation, when they specified healthier materials, they told the contractors that if they were going to substitute different materials, they had to submit documentation that demonstrated those substitutions were healthier. And they said that not only did they land up with very healthy materials throughout the process, they actually landed up with better documentation on the materials that went in than they've ever had on any other project. So it was a really fascinating approach. All right, so it's also helpful if you're interested in this area to know what people are doing now and what is going to go on in the future in terms of the use of healthier building practices. And you can see that the top practice by far, and this is not surprising, is better lighting and daylighting exposure. Now this is a selling point for both, residential and commercial spaces to have a lot of daylight. It's more directly appealing to occupants. It's been required by LEED for a long time. I think people just generally understand that this improves the quality of a building. We see about 2/3, though, saying that they're also using products that enhance thermal comfort and interestingly, spaces that enhance social interactions. I think if we'd done this study 3 years before we did, we wouldn't have seen spaces that enhance social interactions perform quite as strongly as it did in this one. And we do see over half saying, yes, we are frequently using enhanced air quality. We're frequently using products that enhance acoustical comfort, that exclude materials of concern, that we're providing occupant controls, and spaces that enhance tenant mood. Now, we also said, okay, that's what you're using now. What are you likely to be using in the next 5 years? And you can see for the most part, this list consists of the same things we just talked about, that the things they're doing now are the things that they expect to do in the future. However, there are at least 2 items that popped up on this most likely to be used in the next 5 years list that were not showing up in the current use and it's with such strong usage. One of them is biophilic design principles, and that is very exciting because there's been a lot of attention for years now in the design community on biophilia, but this is the first time we've seen an active result that suggests that people are really seriously considering, those beyond the bleeding or the cutting edge are really trying to seriously consider how to add this into their projects. In addition to that, again, going back to, remember, we had that one of the key areas that the public health is focusing on is design for physical activity. Opportunities for physical activity is also something that the design and construction community is looking at as a growth area. Now, we looked at 5 different sectors of construction: education, healthcare, office, hotel, and retail. And of those 5, it was clear that education, healthcare, and offices are very much top sectors for using healthier building products and practices. And all 3 of them were very strong users of low VOC, daylighting, of course, smart technologies for building operations, occupant controls, and mechanical ventilation strategies to improve air quality. When we looked for differences by sector, though, a few things popped out in the education sector that were much more widely used than in the others. Natural ventilation, this isn't really that surprising given the school year and the opportunities it opens up for natural ventilation. Access to natural features, though, this emphasis on that we're somehow seem to be more aware that that is important when we're dealing with children or younger adults than we seem to be once we put ourselves in the workplace. And then the idea that site design includes sidewalks and bike trails. Again, that focus on physical activity that right now is better developed in the education sector than anywhere else. And when it came to the healthcare sector, actually, I was a bit surprised that the only product and practice that was embraced by a statistically significant larger percentage than any other sector was the use of art. And I think the greater awareness of biophilia in the healthcare sector than in a lot of the others leads to this. The idea is that there have been studies that have demonstrated that views of nature, and they don't necessarily have to be direct views of actual natural scenes, that they can be paintings or other reproductions, have had positive impacts on healing. All right, so the last thing we looked at in the study is how owners, architects, and interior designers and contractors learn about healthier building practices and products. And again, we thought it'd be interesting to do a little poll at this point to see what you all think. Tara?
Yep, I just launched the second poll. So what kind of info would you like to learn more about? Choose one answer. So either ways to measure health impact, materials, toxins, chemicals of concern, health benefits, strategies that promote physical activity, or transparency about building materials. It looks like we had more than half, 54%, said ways to measure health impact. I just actually posted the results on the screen. And then the least votes we got was for health benefits.
Okay. So this is how our participants broke out in this. It's not quite as clear how you compare up, but you can look for yourself in your own column. You can see, though, that one of the things that we've really found striking is that a lot of people want to know a lot more about healthier buildings, including owners. 67%, over two-thirds of owners, want to know ways to measure health impacts. And the other things that's really important to them is to just basically understand the health benefits that can come from healthier buildings. And you can see that's a top priority for architects and interior designers as well. But owners are also really interested in things that were rather surprising. In fact, if you look at what owners are interested in versus what architects are interested in, yes, there is a higher percentage for architects in each category, but the difference is about 10 percentage points to 15 percentage points. It's not enormous. It's still they're all sort of hovering right above or below 50%, except for, of course, the ways to measure health impacts. So there really is a real interest in materials, toxins, and chemicals of concerns, and just general transparency about building materials. And we can see that the one group that does tend to lag in terms of that level of interest is contractors. What they are actually most interested in is strategies that promote physical activity, which is a bit surprising because I wouldn't have thought that that would be an area that, oh, wait, that actually should be 44%. So they're most interested in ways to measure health impacts, which makes a lot of sense. So where are people getting this information? They're interested, they want to find out more information, but where are they getting information on products? And where are the sources that they value the most? Where do they think they're getting the best information from? And we can see from our findings those things don't always match up. I've got 4 different slides here that look at the top ways that they're finding out information. And the first one is on product manufacturers. And product manufacturers are by far, that light blue bar is the percentage who are using this source for information, and you can see that's pretty high for architects, interior designers, and contractors. Now, we took everyone who was in that blue bar, and we then asked them, okay, here's all the things you said you're using. Which ones do you think are the most valuable? Out of everything that you're using? And you can see that for architects and interior designers, less than half who are using product manufacturers as a source of information find them really valuable. And it's a pretty low percentage out of owners, too, those who are using them who find them valuable. In fact, the only one that's well over half is contractors who really do look to product manufacturers for this information and consider it of great value. On the other hand, when we look at training and workshops, we still see pretty high levels of people who are using these for information, but you can see that especially among interior designers and contractors, but also among architects and owners, this is considered a pretty valuable source of information. When we look at certifications and standards, owners are not using them that frequently. Only about a third of the owners are using them, but when you look at those owners who are using them, well over half say, yes, this is a very valuable method. Contractors, again, 56% are using them, pretty high percentage, but a pretty high percentage say this is a pretty valuable source of information. Architects do also consider it pretty valuable. Interior designers are less enthusiastic about certification and standards as a valuable source of information than the other participants. And finally, when it comes to healthy building labels, we did give them several sources of information beyond these. These are just the top ones. You can see that, again, not very many owners are using them, but a pretty healthy percentage of owners who are using them consider them among the most valuable of the sources of information that they have. Architects and interior designers, about half are using them, and about half of those consider them very valuable. But contractors, it's only about a quarter who are using them, and only a quarter of them consider them very valuable at all. And I really want to hit on this point for a second. And that, remember, we talked about that case study with this specification issue, because this really is could be a factor in terms of how healthy buildings can be. Right now, when it comes to being influenced by healthy product labels, you can see that most architects and most interior designers report a medium to high level of influence on their product decisions from looking at healthy product labels. But with contractors, it is significantly fewer find them influential. And this is critical because, you can design the healthiest building, you can specify materials that meet very rigid standards, but you need to make sure that that intent is understood by your contractors and that substitutions are not made in ways where the product functions just as well in terms of energy use, in terms of function, in terms of even aesthetics, but perhaps doesn't meet what your goal was for health. This is a real touch point in the industry right now. So when we're looking at what conclusions we can draw here, certainly for commercial real estate, health is becoming an increasingly important part of being sustainable, and in particular right now for firms that are looking for ways to distinguish their sustainable practices, healthier buildings are an opportunity for designers, contractors, and BPMs to have a competitive advantage in green building. Owners find improved employee satisfaction and engagement the most valuable benefits of their healthier building investment so far. And they even view healthier buildings as a critical amenity for tenants and employees. Training and workshops is the best way to reach out to people in the industry to help them learn more about healthier building design and construction activities. And the influence of healthier product labels needs to move beyond architects and designers to ensure that healthier products are used in buildings.